I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Senate Democratic Whip Dick Durbin spoke about efforts to address gun violence on Monday. The Illinois Democrat discussed meeting with hospital CEOs and forming the HEAL Initiative. The HEAL Initiative seeks to help gunshot victims avoid future violence, obtain mental health treatment, and get jobs. Durbin cited the disturbing reality that nearly 50% of gunshot victims end up back in the hospital within 5 years. Let's listen in.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. Over the past 2 years, our understanding of health care and good health practices has changed. The pandemic revealed we cannot limit the delivery of care to the hospital or to the doctor's office. We need to reach out, particularly the most vulnerable members of our community, directly, personally. That's exactly what's underway in Chicago right now. 4 years ago, I brought together the CEOs of the top 10 hospitals in Chicago. They were located in areas around the city, I noticed, that were comparable to the areas of greatest gun violence, each one of those hospitals. So I asked the 10 CEOs to come over for breakfast, and I bought the bagels and coffee, and they sat down around the table, and they looked at one another, and they told me, this is the first time we've ever sat in the same room together. They're competitors. They're trying to get the same people to come to their hospitals. But this morning was a conversation about what they had in common. These hospitals are on the front lines of treating victims with bullet wounds. When I met with those CEOs in 2018, we talked about how you not only treat this kind of violence, but how you prevent it. We launched something called the Chicago HEAL Initiative. HEAL stands for Hospital Engagement Action Leadership. Despite being competitors, these 10 hospital CEOs sat down and on their own, without my input, without my urging or any federal mandates, wrote 16 things they thought they could achieve over a span of 3 years. I looked at the list and said, this sounds good to me. We knew we couldn't solve every aspect of the complex problem facing us with gun violence, but it was a good start. They said to me, the first time we've ever gotten together, and we were able to come up with an agreement. Well, last week the 3 years were up, and we announced what happened at these hospitals over the last 3 years. The gunshot patient in the emergency room, hospitals are no longer just stitching up their wounds. They're also addressing the emotional scars to prevent retaliation. Last year, 3,000 gunshot victims were paired with counselors and caseworkers. Without these interventions, we know that nearly half of the gunshot victims will be back in the hospital within 5 years. That's a fact. But the hospitals are also looking further upstream to try to put an end to violence in the city of Chicago. People say the best way to stop a bullet is with a job. Well, these 10 hospitals took that to heart. Over the last 3 years, these 10 hospitals increased new hires from the neighborhoods of the highest gun violence, which face more poverty than other neighborhoods, obviously, by a whopping 21%. Here's what they do. They go into the high schools and middle schools around the hospitals where they do business and sit down and talk to the kids and say, how would you like to shadow one of our nurses or one of our doctors? See what it's like in the hospital here, and maybe even have a summer internship. All of a sudden, young people are taking an interest in that hospital that they walk by every day and never ever related to. The hospitals also decided they have economic clout. Think of the money that is spent on goods and supplies at every hospital in America. Well, they decided to reach out to their suppliers and say to them, we're going to give you special consideration if you will locate part of your business in the neighborhood around our hospital so that people in the neighborhoods can be working to provide the goods and materials that we need. They increased goods and services from local suppliers by nearly 30%, $120 million last year. Just the beginning, seed money to get these businesses in the neighborhood supplying the hospital. Importantly, these 10 hospitals are going into the Chicago middle and high schools offering apprenticeship programs, and it's working. Last year, 5,000 students went through these apprenticeship and intern programs. This is especially important 2 years into the pandemic. Our hospitals have been hit with shortages of nurses, doctors, critical support staff, not just in the city of Chicago, I might add, but the entire state. I spoke to the Southern Illinois Health Clinic CEO, and he's talking to me about the same thing they're running into in Chicago. They just don't have enough medical professionals. I met last week with the members of the Illinois Hospital Association. They told me that the shortages and burnouts in our health workforce is their top concern. They're working with local schools to recruit students. Madam President, a few years ago, I kept hearing this nursing shortage, and I decided I had to learn what was behind this. And it's a very simple fact of economics. And here's what it comes down to. If you are a registered nurse in my state of Illinois, it is not uncommon for you to have an opportunity to make six-figure salary. Not uncommon at all. And particularly if you're in a big city, you're going to make that much money. That's a good salary, and I believe these nurses deserve it. But then you say, well, we need more nurses. We need to have more nurse training. Well, what do you need for nurse training? A teacher, a professor. How do you take a registered nurse and turn that registered nurse into a professor? 2 years for a master's degree in nursing. Obvious question. What is that nurse going to do for 2 years while she's going to school, or he's going to school, to become a professor? They're not going to get the six-figure salary that they're earning as RNs. So there's an obvious economic disincentive for them to go into teaching, even if they want to do it. Now let's assume they get through the 2 years and the master's degree, and now they're professors. The amount that they're being paid at the community college or at the nursing school is not comparable to the salary of an RN. So the economics of the situation come in as a great obstacle. So what happens, you know this, I'm sure very well, Senator, what happens to the hospital that doesn't have enough nurses? They have to go out for what they call contract nurses. I'm not holding anything against these people. They make a living and pretty smart at it. They make themselves available. Some of them move all over the country to be in different hospitals, and they get paid dramatically more than the RNs who are on the regular staff. One hospital told me they pay 3 times the rate for a contract nurse as a regular nurse. Another said 5 times the rate. If you can think what that means, the budgets of these hospitals and clinics are going through the roof with these additional costs for nursing shortage. So we've got to find a way to create the economics of more nursing professors from the RN pool that is overtaxed, working hard, getting paid 6 figures, and move them into teaching ranks. The obvious beneficiaries are all of us in America, but directly it's hospitals and clinics. So they have to join with us in a joint effort to try to solve this problem. We also know that trauma is at the root of much of the pain and conflict in our neighborhoods. You've heard the phrase, hurt people hurt people. Almost 30 years ago, the CDC did a study on adverse childhood experiences called ACEs. They found that witnessing violence or growing up without a stable home can really have an impact on the human mind, the mind of a child. Without the right help, that trauma can rewire a child's brain and change the way they see the world. It's not hard to see how this fuels a cycle of violence. Under the HEAL initiative, these 10 Chicago hospitals are bringing their medical expertise into the community to help children cope with traumatic experiences. I've seen it in a classroom. In one of the classrooms called Calm Classrooms, a project which teaches meditation in school. I was in a classroom of 3rd graders, and the teacher said to the kids at their desks, now we're going to be quiet for 5 minutes. So everybody just think about what we're going to do today. There was one kid who just couldn't do it. He was fidgeting. He wanted to talk. She was telling him, no, be quiet for a little while. And I said to the teacher afterwards, what's going on? She said, that little boy is going through some real problems at home. I said, what are you going to do about it? She said, Senator, I'm a teacher. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a counselor. We need somebody to sit down and talk to him. He needs help right now. Well, imagine all these kids coming back from their Zoom educations, trying to get back in the classroom and into the swing of things. For a lot of kids, there's an adjustment. They need a helping hand. So what we're trying to teach is that what's going on with mental health issues, wellness issues, trauma issues, all relate to the outcomes we're looking for. Kids who are successful in school and kids who avoid the gangs and violence on the street. 2 weeks ago, I visited Drake Elementary School, the Drake Dragons, where I toured one of the school clinics and the mobile health van. Listen to this, Senator, you're going to like this. They have a clinic in the school itself. They treat the kids with counseling and physical health, whatever needs they have. They, of course, are there for the staff, but they also make it open to the families of the kids. No questions asked. Come on down to our clinic. When you drop your kid off at school, come on into the clinic if you need a helping hand. And they've expanded it out to the neighborhood as well. It's a great idea, and it's based in the school, what I like about it. It's been years and years since I was in the grade school. We had an occasional school nurse, but that was about it. What would you think about a real clinic in the school? And over half of the people who come in need mental health counseling. It's an important part of life, and they're responding to it. We were joined at our meeting just a week or so ago by Dr. Walensky from the CDC. She applauded these hospitals who are part of the Chicago HEAL initiative, and she said this innovative partnership is exactly what CDC sees in the future. I hope that President Biden agrees. I'm sure he will. In his fiscal year 2023 budget, the president called for $250 million investment in community violence intervention to support programs like the HEAL initiative. Believe me, I'm going to knock on his door. And in March, in his State of the Union address, the president urged lawmakers to come on a bipartisan basis to address mental health. Debbie Stabenow, our colleague from Michigan, has been one of the strongest proponents on mental health, and she was talking about this and should. The president hears the message, and he's delivering. I partnered also with Senator Capito, Republican of West Virginia, on the Rise from Trauma Act, which will help more kids heal from trauma. Our bill will increase the resources for a trauma-informed workforce. Projects like HEAL and this legislation with Senator Capito can really change lives for the better. But let me say a word about gun violence, because in the city of Chicago, which I'm honored to represent, it breaks my heart what's happening in that city. Not last weekend, but the weekend before, 37 shootings in the course of a weekend. 7 people died. This weekend, 9 people were killed, 26 others wounded by gunfire. This is the beginning of the summer months. I'm afraid that it tells us we still have a massive challenge ahead of us. We have to do more at every single level. Let's start with what HEAL Initiative is doing. Bring some hope to the lives of folks. Give them an opportunity for a decent paying job. Let them have a place affordable to live that is safe from gunshots and other threats to a family. We've got to work on this together to deal with the criminal justice system. We learned the hard way that simply putting tougher sentences down for something like crack cocaine is not necessarily the answer. In fact, it can backfire, as it did, we learned over the last 20 years. We've got to have sensible criminal sentencing guidelines that punish wrongdoing, of course, keep dangerous people off the street, of course, but give people a chance to rebuild their lives. Many of them will be able to do it. Let me also say that we have to have effective prosecution. We lost one of our best Chicago policewomen just last year. Her name was Ella French. Ella French, a lovely, young, respected police officer, sitting in her car with her partner. A fellow came up with a gun, shot her in the back of the head, unfortunately killed her, and then shot her partner in the head too, and blinded him in one eye. His name is Officer Yanez. I met him at the Southside Irish Parade. Well, the tribute to Ella French, who lost her life in the line of duty, was like something I've never seen before in Chicago. They went to a high school in the southern part of the city and took the chapel and set it aside for visitors to come and pay their respects. Senator, you wouldn't believe the lines that went on for blocks, men and women in uniform and everybody else, myself, my wife, and folks in the city to pay their respects to Ella French. She was an extraordinary person. The gun that killed her was a straw purchase gun. What does that mean? Somebody went into a federal gun dealer and said, I want to buy a gun. They looked and checked, and that person had no criminal record. The person bought the gun, turned around, went outside, and handed it to a convicted felon, who then turned around and killed this policewoman. That is a straw purchase. Unfortunately, for too long, we have treated that as a bookkeeping crime, a misdemeanor, nothing serious. It is serious. Straw purchases are a way to avoid the prohibition under the law of a person with a criminal record buying a gun. We ought to treat it as a serious matter. I've appealed to all the U.S. attorneys in my state and I hope all senators will to their U.S. attorneys across the nation. Take straw purchasing seriously. This is not a bookkeeping error. This is a deadly crime that can kill innocent, good people like Ella French and maim the officer who was with her. So we got to take that seriously. This weekend that I just referred to, the previous one, 37 shootings, one of them was on Sunday night. Madam President, they went to the scene afterwards and found 68 cartridges. 68. The people in the neighborhood said it sounded like a war zone. 2 of the cartridges were from an AK-47, a military assault type rifle, which has no place anywhere except in the military, or maybe some police application, but in this case was being used in a shootout between 2 people in cars. I don't understand what happened next. They ended up finding one of the people who was involved in the shooting. He had a gun. He had the gun illegally. He doesn't have a firearm identification card required under Illinois law. And after taking a look at the facts of the situation, they're planning on charging him with a misdemeanor. What's going on here? A misdemeanor for a shootout on the streets of Chicago with 68 cartridges on the ground afterwards? Whether it's a straw purchase, treated as a bookkeeping error, or a shootout with an AK-47 treated as a misdemeanor, we have got to send the word out that this is unacceptable, not just in Chicago, but unacceptable across this country. If you want to legally own a gun, store it properly, use it properly and legally, I'm all for it. And I think that's what the Second Amendment's all about. But what's going on in the streets of Chicago, streets of East St. Louis, Rockford, and so many other cities is a shootout of a massive amount of guns that are finding their way onto the streets. So we've got to take that seriously. Let me just close by saying last week the Senate did a great job filling another critical law enforcement vacancy in Chicago. We confirmed Oak Park Police Chief LaDon Reynolds to be our city's Northern District's next U.S. Marshal. That seat has been vacant for almost 4 years. It's a critical position for reducing crime, apprehending fugitives, and protecting our judges. Marshal Reynolds is the man for the job. Breaking the cycle of violence in Chicago and across America requires the best. All of us need to pull together. Families, schools, community organizations, law enforcement, the public health community, faith leaders, the business community, and more. I'm glad that the HEAL initiative is a start in that direction. We got more work to do, and we cannot allow any petty Washington politics to get in the way. I yield the floor, suggest the absence of quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin.